So like everything else, it takes a village. Thanks, Gretchen. No, I just said it takes a village, as like with everything. So thank you for helping. It takes a sangha, exactly. So I want to start by telling you where Chris is.
Where is she?
Yeah, where is she? So she sent this last night, but I saw it at 5 this morning. And she wrote, I am being called to go to this interfaith vigil in Oakland this morning. And this is the message that she had received, and this is where she is. In response to the arrival of federal agents to the Bay Area, DHS, ICE, CBP, with 100 already staying on Alameda's Coast Guard Island, and with numbers expected to increase to 1,200, we will be gathering in prayer, witness, and outrage.
And Rachel, a special prayer. I just got word about that too, because I'm driving somebody for their ICE appointment tomorrow. And let's put out a special prayer for that, because they're throwing flash grenades at the clergy, at the faith leaders, being very aggressive. So everyone just keep them.
Yeah. So
let's lots of light.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I don't know how Buddhist this is, but I think we should take a moment and send some light and protection and love surrounding our teacher, Chris, surrounding all the clergy, surrounding everyone gathered there, doing our best to send our love always.
And to the ICE agents and all those people.
That's what I meant. Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Always,
Yeah.
all around, leaving no one out, right? Okay. So this is my first talk beyond my way-seeking mind talk. It feels like a very different kind of talk, because it's not just all about me, although a lot of it's about me. And again, I have notes, but I'm really going to try not to read. I'll do my best to manage my nerves. I appreciate all of your attention and trust and the support that I feel from Sangha on screen and in present. So I usually get a little chaotic in response to an invitation to write or speak. I make lots of notes, and I take notes on my notes. I end up with pages of quotations with no citations. Sometimes just a word on a page or a page number, and always with the confidence that I'll remember its significance in context, and generally I'm wrong about that. So this morning, after getting the text from Chris and having my kind of reaction just mostly about what the heck is happening, the catastrophe, the transgressions that are happening. And then I was just thinking, well, maybe I'll rethink what I was going to talk about today. And I checked my email, and I found that I had sent myself an email last night with the line, "They are all mine." And of course, I was otherwise completely blank. Like, what? Where was that from? What did that mean? But I searched for it, and I managed to find it. But I'll step back and say, in my preparations, I have 3 beginnings, 8 middles, and no ending for this talk. And now I'm going to start with something completely different because I deeply trust my midnight notes to self. And so after a bit of panicked searching, I did find the article the quote comes from, and I'm going to begin there. I read an article in the New Yorker, I think it was last week's issue, and it's about a new documentary on Netflix called The Lessons of a Perfect Neighbor. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to tell you the story even though it refers to some shocking violence. So we're surrounded by shocking violence, right? Because I think it contains the whole world that we live in and that we aim to heal. So this is a synopsis. I know I'll get some details wrong. But here's what I remember. A white woman living, a woman in her late 50s, named Susan Lawrence, might be pronouncing it wrong, living in a rental house in Ocala, Florida, living on a street and in a neighborhood full of young working class families, mostly black. The kids were being kids, mostly outside on bikes and scooters and roller skates, playing tag, touch football, turning cartwheels, being noisy, being kids. Lorenz was frightened and undone by these children. She interpreted their ordinary play as an ongoing crime or a conspiracy to drive her insane. She continually called 911 and confronted the children, often with hostility and threats. One day, she threw a roller skate at a 9-year-old boy named Israel, who lived across the street from her. She may also have taken his tablet, and witnesses saw her swinging an umbrella. She called the police. I am fearing for my life. I am just sick of these children. Meantime, Israel went home and told his mother about the altercation. His mother's name was G.K. Owens. She was understandably angry. She crossed the street to pound on the door and demanded to speak to Lorenz. Moments later, Lorenz fatally shot Owens through the dead-bolted metal door. Owens was 35 years old and had 4 children. So what was this woman's reality? How did she see the world? How did she see who was her and who was other? A police officer, later interviewing neighbors, paused to ask a woman standing there in which of the assembled kids happened to be hers. None of the children's parents were actually present at that moment, but the woman answers without hesitation, "They're all mine." There were, a lot of musings in the article about sociological factors, physiological factors, mental health, etc., to try to understand this woman's responses. But how many things are true at once? These are my enemies, they pose danger. They're all mine. So back to one of my 3 beginnings. And perhaps there'll be a link, hopefully, to the impulse to share this story. As I thought about this talk, entering the sutra, I was stuck on the need to somehow make, for all of you, for all of us, this sutra relevant, given our times. The first thing I talk about has to be, why is studying this sutra relevant? and what of my own experience is relevant to share? The answer came to me because things are bad and times are short. Time is short. Things are bad and time is short. And I can feel the heaviness of that as I say it. And yet, we are immersing ourselves in the Avatamsaka Sutra, which seems to profess the opposite. Revealing to us the world that Buddhas experience, see, inhabit at the moment of their enlightenment. And saying to us, this is true reality. Goodness, love, compassion, and in this unfathomably ornate, opulent, kind of transcendent, bejeweled way. So again, so many things are true at once. And frankly, this sort of is baffling to me. Is this some kind of a bypass? Is this attainable for us? If it's not attainable for us, what are we doing when there's so much work to be done? So I found a lot of comfort in Ben Connolly's new book. It's based on the Avatamsaka Sutra. It's really worth reading, I think, especially the beginning, to kind of contextualize his own struggle around wanting to write something about this sutra, but it's so vast, like how could you possibly condense it or talk about it? And, you know, but his intention was to make it relevant and accessible. And immediately he offers that Huayan Buddhism, which is based on the sutra, is foundational, as Chris was saying the other day, to Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings on interbeing, which are the basis for his work in engaged Buddhism. He mentions Joanna Macy's work. I'll add Jane Goodall's work, right? Anyone whose life was seeing, understanding on the deepest of levels that life is all interconnected, all life. I call it all, animal, vegetable, and mineral, as animated, sentient, related, interdependent, thus essential to love and protect. I had a little bit of my own growth moment in this, which was sort of surprising to me. Interbeing always felt like a really abstract kind of perception of reality, like, yeah, that's probably true, but there's some way that I'm now understanding engaged action, bearing witness, which is what Chris is doing today, as its essential manifestation. So that Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings on interdependence, like in the Heart Sutra, where he explained, like, interbeing, that nothing has a separate existence. So the example of eating an apple, and how the apple could not exist without the soil and the sun and the water and the farmer and all the workers who planted and cultivated and harvested, transported the truck and the fuel, on and on and on. And there was something deeper that happened for me in this, of now seeing that it's like it went from abstraction to me to saying, like, no, the call is that we need not to just have an understanding conceptually that all these things are connected, but that our vow is to take care of all of these elements, so many of which and so many of whom are threatened. So this inspired me to look a little further, to stay open. And then I came across Connolly's translation of the seal of the Huayan One Vehicle Dharma Realm by Huayan, with his commentary on each line. And this poem takes as its source the Avatamsaka Sutra, and it provides entry points as he said, it provides a compact expression of this deep well of Dharma. I think I'd like to read it to you. And then I'll go on a little bit, and then we'll read it together. One of the exciting things for me in reading this, I mean, I feel like a novice student, but in reading this, I could sort of start to feel connections of like, I've heard something similar here, or maybe this comes from here, and I think you will too, right? We've studied the Heart Sutra and the Sandakai. So here is the seal of the Huayan One Vehicle Dharma realm. Dharma nature is all-pervading harmony without duality. All dharmas are unmoving, fundamentally peaceful. Without name, without characteristic, cutting through all, it is known in realized wisdom, not in another realm. True nature is so very profound, minutely subtle. Not attached to self-nature, it arises dependent on conditions. Within one is all, within many is one. One is all, the many is one. The many are one. Within one mote of dust is contained the 10 directions. Within each phenomenon, it is also thus. Immeasurable distant eons are one moment of mind. One moment of mind is immeasurable eons. The 9 times and the 10 times are mutually identical, yet not mixed or disordered. They arise separately. The mind's first aspiration for awakening is true awakening. Life and death and nirvana are always identical. Universal and particulars are thus unfathomable, not distinct. This is the realm of the 10 Buddhas and Samantabhadra, the great ones. In the midst of Buddha's ocean seal samadhi, the abundant manifestations of wish fulfillment are inconceivable. The rain of jewels benefits all life, filling all space. All beings benefit according to their capacities. Thus, the practitioner returns to their true source. Without ending delusion, it is surely not attained. Unconditional, skillful means bring wish fulfillment. Returning home, effortlessly gaining treasures, through Dharani, an inexhaustible treasure adorns the Dharma realm, a true jeweled palace. Just sitting in the bed of the middle way, the ultimate reality. This original stillness is named Buddha. Let's take a minute and see what it's reverberating, what the experience was. I was so happy to find it, and I felt drawn to it, and I started by just chanting it, reading it over and over, and I noticed that it started to have a really calming, kind of uplifting effect on me. And it was bringing on these different states of mind and mood, evoking images, body sensations, different insights, different memories. I'd never had any experience like this. And so just again to say, this is core, this is the Avatamsaka Sutra in this poem. And so I thought, okay, this feels nice. And then I started to notice that this uplift started to live in me more as inspiration, activation. And I became more opening to then entering the 10 stages, which I had kind of gone like this, opened at one point and immediately shut. The table of contents was, in like the font like size 2, 8.5 pages. And the prose was mind-boggling. And then after a bit, I realized that our minds are meant to be boggled here. I also saw in the contents at the very end that there's something called the prerequisite conditions for hearing the 10 grounds teachings. That made me very curious. Are we qualified? Am I qualified? And so the prerequisite conditions are children of the Buddha. As for this chapter on the Bodhisattva practice gateways by which one accumulates the meritorious qualities associated with the knowledge of all modes and all knowledge, if any being had not themselves already planted roots of goodness, he would be unable to even obtain the hearing of it. So we're qualified. We're in. I think this will come up more when we're doing the 10 stages. Connolly says the mind's first aspiration for awakening is true awakening. That line just really stuck with me. And he says it refers to the Mahayana Buddha concept of bodhicitta, right, which is that energy, that awakened energy, awakened mind. And that in the 10 stages chapter, there are 10 distinct steps laid out, we think, on the path to true awakening, completing Buddhahood, starting with the initial moment of bodhicitta. I'm going to say a couple of things about the 10 grounds, because we're going to start on them next week. We're going to do all 10 of them. Just a couple of quotes. The subject of the 10 grounds is the Bodhisattva's ascent through 10 grounds, planes, or levels of spiritual path cultivation transited by bodhisattvas as she progresses from the state of a common person toward that of a fully enlightened Buddha. This sutra, as with every other sutra in the Buddhist canon, is meant to convey what the Buddha realized and taught to his followers. This is the world of enlightenment. Norman says it describes Dharmatadu, which is the infinite universe as seen by the Buddha. Connolly confirms what we know from, we've glanced at it. It's a mind-blowing account of the Bodhisattva's path of ever-deepening practice. Each stage includes wondrous spiritual achievements which open ever onward into deeper compassion and joy. And so we're called to a compassion that is utterly limitless. Speaking of the Bodhisattva's vow to liberate all beings, the sutra says, as long as the earth exists, as long as all beings exist, as long as acts and afflictions exist, so long will my vow remain. It is an utter lack of limitation on our aspiration to care for people. And Norman says, which I think is a lot of what we'll be doing, read it aloud together, not for information, to let the words go, but to have an experience and to somehow know that this world that is described and professed is what's behind the very simple expression of Zen. I'm going to say a little bit about imagination. Norman and others say, like, this is It's this experience of reading the Avatamsaka Sutra. It's an immersion into this cosmic world, and it's an imaginative world. It's a real world. The Buddha's eye is the eye of the imagination. And I think this, is bringing, for me, it brings us back, as so often, like these impossible vows that we take to save all beings, to learn that we're all of the same body-mind, to stop ice, to do everything we can to provide safety and protection and compassion. Francis Weller, who does a lot of work on grief, said the other day in a talk, we need immensity. So how do we become immense? And this line from Norman in The World Could Be Otherwise, which I'm hoping we'll actually study fully one day, he says, the only way to do what cannot be done is to do it imaginatively. Mm-hmm. He says a lot about imagination, that origination, one of the four, I think it's the second, third of the Noble Truths. Dissatisfaction and suffering originate in the failure of our imagination to see things as they truly are. We could say that this woman's, in that story, right, a failure of imagination. Right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How much of our suffering, the world's suffering, individual, collective, is a failure of imagination? Quote I like here from Joanna Macy, quoted in Connolly. Action on behalf of life transforms because the relationship between self is reciprocal. It's not a question of first getting enlightened and then saved and then acting as we work to heal the earth, and I'll add each other, the earth and each other heals us. It's a real sense of reciprocity. So Norman advocates in this book, and interestingly, he uses the 6 perfections, and I'm not going to go into today like what the 10 stages are of the 10 grounds, but most of them correlate to a perfection. So if that's helpful, like there are going to be some ways into this that we can find. He really talks about the development of imagination as a necessity for human survival and thriving in these times, and that the practice of imagination has to be more than a good idea or an aspiration. It needs a path of development, a process, a discipline to support it. So he uses the 6 perfections. We're going to be using the 10 gates. But we're going to find our way in together. I want to finish with a quote from Norman. I feel like Chris with Post-its. For the Mahayana scriptures reveal the Buddha to be an endless, illuminated, imaginative projection whose limitless purpose was the same as that of each and every human being. That purpose was compassion, the endless caring and salvific activity that would relieve the suffering of infinite beings throughout time and space. the Buddha portrayed by Mahayana Buddhists, scriptures, is the imaginary embodiment of love.
Mhm.
So here's an ending. It's a prayer. May my mind and imagination and consciousness expand and open, so that when encountering suffering, animal, vegetable, or mineral, and I wonder what mine is to take care of, my reflex answer is to say, they are all mine. They are all mine. I'm really interested in hearing, I'll get to you in a minute, responses. I know we usually break up into small groups. We can certainly do that. I can conjure a question.